very T.S. Eliot, you know. But let's kind of just figure out what happens in the poem. I'm going to have you do an art project today about character in this poem, because I think this poem does an amazing job building character. But before we get there, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page with kind of like what's happening, not just the themes in it, which I was hearing like quite a lot of really amazing themes coming forward as you were inspired by the modernism stuff, and then kind of looking at the language. Let's just see if we can figure out though if there actually is a plot here with characters. So the very first signal that we get that there is a character in this is that the title is called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. So we know that there is a man named J. Alfred Prufrock who is writing a love song, right? And a love song kind of signals then that he's writing this poem to somebody else. He's writing these thoughts to somebody, because it's like when you give somebody a love song or a love poem or something like that, there's usually an object of your love. And yet, the first line of this, let us go then, you and I. Okay, there we've got our characters. There is a you and there is an I. And you're like, okay, great, I'm ready for the love song, right? And it says, when the evening is spread out against the sky, beautiful, gorgeous, like language there, the evening spread out against the sky like a blanket, right? And then it says, no, like a patient, etherized upon a table. How does that kind of upset your expectations right away, Ellie Rose?
Because you think of, when you think of evening spread out against the sky, you imagine like a super, super broad image of like a sunset. And then that's versus a patient who's like kind of like sick or dying.
Yeah.
It's a really sad scene on like alone in this like cold white room on a table.
Right. Oh, I like that. That's very interesting that the evening sky is associated with darkness, and yet this etherized patient is usually associated with very bright clinical type light, right? So you get the juxtaposition in a lot of different ways, or the contrast between the feelings of the two images, between the expectations and genres of the two images, and then also, I guess, between the actual like look of the two images as well. Yeah.
I think that is interesting because I think our natural association, and this is just a product of like hundreds of thousands of years of art and writing. I think our natural association with like the evening sky is like, you know, stars and individualism and romanticism and all this, and then it contrasts with this image of a patient immobilized and at the mercy of another force.
Yes.
And he repeats that, like he talks about being pinned and unwilling. Like I think that contrast between like the world at your fingertips, you know, there's like really joyous, optimistic worldview. So like, you are at the mercy of somebody else, and you are the patient in a world of surgeons, and it's just kind of like it's interesting.
Brilliant. I love that. I love that idea of immobilization right at the very beginning, right? And so that you are at the mercy of somebody else. And I like how you said that, at the mercy of some other force too. Yeah. Because you're unconscious. The patient is unconscious, and they just have to kind of trust that the people that are working on them have their best intentions at heart. But they have no control. Yes. So here he is. He's wandering through these deserted streets. He's going through places that are one-night cheap hotels, sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. So we get a sense of the setting too. We've got this city setting. Later on we hear about how it's covered in like yellow smoke, yellow fog. And the fog is like this cat that's like slithering between the buildings, right? And rubbing its back against the buildings. So it's this very like sickly, jaundiced kind of city. You know, where if you breathe the air, you're in danger of becoming that etherized patient, basically. And here's this like, it's industrial, it's full of soot and chimneys and so on. But in that setting, he's also interacting with one-night cheap hotels, sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. What are those kinds of places? What is he referring to there? What are one-night cheap hotels? Yeah, like brothels, right? Was that what you were gonna say, Kylie? Yeah, and oysters are an aphrodisiac, supposedly.
Yeah, which is weird because
they are kind of disgusting. I don't like them. I don't like them because you got that. I don't like the texture.
the fact that you have to like.
Yes, good. That sound, right? I think that sound is really important here in this poem too. So it's like the oyster shells, the sound, which is like really gross. You have sawdust floors, so people are just throwing their remains around, and you have all that associated with one-night hotels. So there's kind of debauchery in the city as well, a lack of morality in the city. And then it says at the end, to lead you, you're going through these streets, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let's go and make our visit. What's happening there at the end of that stanza? What's the plot right there? We have characters, we have settings, and what is this character doing in the setting? Allie Rose?
This person, like specifically here, she says, like, I'm not just gonna explain it to you. I'm not just gonna tell you. And she's like, yeah, I'm not just gonna tell you about it.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna come with me and you're gonna see everything that's like.
Yes, good. So I'm gonna lead you through this place. I'm not going to actually blatantly tell you anything. Brooklyn?
I think it's important that he says like of insidious intent, like right before he says that, because it's like it kind of leads up to like that what he's gonna show this person or tell this person about, like or the scene he's about to describe is not like some
Love song,
yeah,
maybe.
it's just, like there's ulterior motives and it's not gonna end well. Like it's not like he doesn't have good intentions.
Yes, good. We get so much foreshadowing there, right? The insidious intent, it sounds like, so it says streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. So he's saying that the streets, because they are so winding, it's like Seattle or something, like seems like there's no sort of direction here, that those seem to have insidious intents, but then immediately he leads to his own question, and he says, I'm gonna lead you through these insidious streets. So it foreshadows that it's almost like a Jack the Ripper kind of vibe right here at the beginning. Like it feels terrifying, really. Yeah, Ella.
When he said the let us go make our visit, it kind of reminds me of like stupid, but when Aladdin shows Jasmine everything, he's like, well, I can show you the world. He's like, I can show you all these horrible indiscretions in our city that are hidden.
Yeah, I guess it's like instead of I can show you the world in this beautiful starlit sky with the pyramids and whatever, it's I can show you the world. This is what it looks like. It's covered in yellow fog and cheap hotels. Yeah, I like that.
I think I took the yellow fog as like this is modernism is a time in a war. So the yellow fog is like it reminded me of mustard gas. I don't know if mustard gas is actually yellow, but like if it's like this overline or like it's something that's always on their mind.
Yes.
Like what if we get like attacked and like lose everything? Like this city that is built up with so many bad things, but also like things that I could love. What if we just get destroyed?
Absolutely, and I do think that's an allusion there to mustard gas. And not a direct reference, but I do think there's an allusion there too. Yeah. All right, so here he is. He's going through this thing, and he has some sort of overwhelming question, right? That's kind of the plot through this whole thing. He has some kind of overwhelming question that he wants to ask you, the person he's calling you. But he keeps saying, like, no, don't ask me what it is. Don't ask me what it is. I don't want to tell you. I don't, right? And then if you go a little bit further down, where it's like, let's see, there will be time. Where's the first there will be time? Okay, good. It's on the very, very top of the second page. And indeed, there will be time. Okay, and then you get more of the yellow smoke, like the cat. And there will be time. There will be time. There will be time to murder and create. And time for all the works and days of hands. Time for you and time for me and time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea. So why does he keep repeating that phrase? There will be time, over and over again. We might even call it a refrain there because it repeats so often. Yeah.
Maybe it's almost like him trying to convince himself that there will be time because during this time, everyone was kind of concerned, like how we are now, kind of. It's like we don't know how long like this would last. Like time feels kind of relative because it's already October. Yeah. And so he's saying like there has to be time. There must be time for people to be able to do the stuff. There has to be. Like, he's kind of like trying to convince himself while he's convincing the person he's talking to.
Yeah, I associate that with a kind of despair, you know, trying to tell yourself, no, there's time to do this thing. Like, I still have time. We have time as a species, as a culture, right? I like that idea of him trying to convince himself then. Ella?
Could he be sort of slowly criticizing society's focus on productivity sort of after the Industrial Revolution? Like,
yes.
Sort of saying, like, no, there will be time, like, don't worry. Like, because it seems like in this kind of from World War I to kind of now, we've increasingly become this time-obsessed nation and just society, because we're like, everyone has to be uber productive, uber successful, uber. I think he's saying like there will be time to murder and create, and I feel like that in itself is kind of a criticism of like our roles as people.
Yeah, a criticism, and yet at the same time also cynical, because he's saying in the time, because we are humans and we have human nature, we can create things, and that's all wonderful and good, but that means there's also time to murder as well. You know, so getting away from that productivity might allow a lot of freedom in good and bad ways. Yeah.
It reminds me of like Vienna by Billy Joel, I think, and it's basically a song that I think he wrote for his little brother who really wanted to get into like a big orchestra, and he was just overloading himself. And it's the song where it says like there will be time, you can slow down, you can wait.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of this, where like this person is trying so hard to see that, trying so hard to see, oh, we don't need to like panic, we don't need to rush.
Yes. And I think what you guys are tapping into too is this idea of him trying so hard to convince himself. That means that we're not convinced by it, right? Why is that the case? Why aren't we convinced by his desperation to say that there will be time? What is he saying for himself that there is time for?
To be able to do the things that are indulgences into humanity, because throughout the poem you kind of feel like he's really old, and so like to say like to murder and create is something that a human can choose to do, either to murder or to create life. And I think he's like having this kind of like, I'm really old, I wonder if I'll even have time.
If I have time at all,
like,
yeah.
even though it's a bad thing, I want to know if I could be able to do that with the little time I have.
Good, yeah, I like that. Brooklyn.
Kind of like with the context of like how he's in like hell, right? Or
Could be, yeah.
or I remember like
like Dante at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
like there was something like it makes me think like there will be time to murder and create. Like he kind of wants both sides of the coin. Like he wants to be able to like be free and like do all these things like maybe that would be considered like crimes or sins, but then he also like wants time to for 100 visions and revisions. Like he wants to be able to like, because he knows like I'm gonna do some bad things, but I want time to like he's trying to convince himself there will be time to just like fix it, I guess.
Yes. So I like that. You're taking, it's almost like he then is embodying both the Guido character from the Inferno that we talked about, the guy who had been fraudulent, and the Dante character who wants to revise and create the character, right? And so it's like this combination of the two, and he's saying there's got to be time to kind of embody both then. A kind of impossible situation then as well. All right, so this whole poem he's trying to say a question though, right? Like he says, there's an overwhelming question. No, I'm not going to tell you, you just follow me. And then later on he says, there will be time. So part of it, the immediacy of the poem, we're talking about larger world themes, you know. The immediacy is he's saying there's time for you to find out what this question is, right? And then he says later on, do I dare? It's kind of referring back to that question again, like, do I dare say the question? I don't know. What is it going to do, you know? And it gets so, he thinks this question is so important. At the end, like in the very middle of the second page, he says, do I dare disturb the universe? So he's like, whatever question I'm about to ask is going to completely disturb the entire way of being, you know? And he says, in a minute, there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. What do you think the tone is of that little couplet? In a minute, there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. Yeah, Ella?
In a minute, you can make a decision to like, oh, I'm gonna hit this person, or like detention, like maybe having to like do all this extra work, or the time that it takes to actually make up for the bad thing you could make a decision on in 1 second. It's much worse than, it's like the revision is more worse than the decision itself.
Yeah, so how would you label that emotion? What is that emotion right there?
I think I would label it as, no, it's like, I would say that to me that kind of sounds like a sense of anxiety to me, because he's saying like, oh, I can make this
Yeah.
decision, but what would be the consequence, and would the consequence be worse than the actual like the feeling I get automatically from that decision?
Yes, and the fact that it's happening in a minute too, so there's that urgency too. Yes, yeah.
I think in a way, and just kind of going back to the stanza we were talking about previously, this idea that progress in and of itself is sort of an illusion, that it's built upon all these, vile characteristics of society, just kind of going back to that last stanza, this idea that, people preparing to, like kind of preparing masks of fraudulence, like preparing the faces you'll meet and things like that, kill, but then also to reproduce, frame, and fabricate, societal developments, and then also with the indecisions and visions and revisions, just confusion, dissent, repetition, this cycle, sort of this endless, perpetual cycle of progress, which is only reversed by, revision and sort of this, new version of progress, so to speak.
Yes, that was so well put. Yes, and I think that at the same time that there's that kind of anxiety, it's like an anxiety in stasis, a perpetual anxiety.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So then it's like here he is. He's talking about like how he has grown older and older. He's measuring his life with coffee spoons, and he says, "How should I presume?" What is he referring to there? Presume what? This one's tough. If you look back and he's saying, do I dare disturb the universe? That's the last question that we see from him. And then the next question is, so how should I presume? Allie Rose?
Well, from this specific stanza, he's like talking about like he already knows everything, and he has lived his life. He has dealt with having to like portion out his life in a way, with like the coffee spoon part, and
yeah, kind of repetition and habit, right, in his life.
And he has like he's heard the music. He can hear death calling for him in a way, because he says beneath the music from a farther room. So I'm thinking hearing like death's call.
I like
And
that.
so when he says, so how should I presume? He's asking like, I already know everything. Should I affect others with the same kind of knowledge
Yes.
when I'm so close to making it fall?
I love that reading. Yeah. So it's like, if I have something that's going to disturb the universe, if I have some kind of knowledge or question that's going to disturb the universe, is me, an old man who's going to be leaving this universe soon, should I then presume to change the universe in that way? Okay, we're going quickly because it's a very long poem, right? So he goes through this whole poem thinking about whether or not he should ask this question. Do we get any idea about the nature of the question? We never hear what the question is, but how do we know what he's even referring to, Kylie?
I feel like we could try to answer that question based on the title. Like we know it's a love song, so if the question is pertaining to that, then it could be like a question of like, hey, do you like me?
Yeah. It could be something as simple as like connecting with another person, right? Whoever this you is that he's afraid to ask. He's saying, I have this question, but I can't, it's gonna change everything. I can't ask it. Kylie?
Especially because like this is during a time where like there was like loneliness, discontent, and all that stuff. And so it's kind of like you always need some, like, it's normal to want someone there with you, but like especially during times of like trouble, or like during like especially or like right now and when this is a thing, it's important to like have someone there with you so that you can have someone to share your feelings with, especially when it's like chaos. So.
And yet he's terrified to actually share the feelings, right? Yeah. Ella?
I actually think it's maybe religious.
Okay.
Or at least questioning the order of the universe, because usually when he brings up the question, it surrounds some sort of illusion or religion. Like he says, he talks about Lazarus. He says, to squeeze the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, which I think is kind of maybe not a criticism, but at least a acknowledgement that like with religion, it kind of does force this giant idea on you and then expect you to rationalize it in your brain and then just live based on this, right? But so then he says, you know, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, so I should tell you all.
Oh,
So
I
he
like
alludes
that.
to Christianity right there.
Yes.
But then also like page 4, he says, I guess 2 pages before, when he first mentions the question, streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent can lead to an overwhelming question. I feel like given that he's a modernist, maybe that is kind of critical of modern religion, just that like it's maybe insidious in its intent and like its purpose really is to just sort of create dysfunction and like roll you towards this question that no human could possibly rationalize or understand.
Right, and earlier he also says he's no prophet too, which is a reference to religion as well. I think that's a great way to read it. I do think though, at the same time, I think we can see the question in many, many different ways, which is why modernism can be so fun. At the same time, there does seem to be a woman in this poem, right? In that same Lazarus stanza, on the 3rd page at the bottom, he's saying that among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile? And then he gets into these religious references that Ella's talking about, but he says, come back to, if one settled a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. So what's happening there? Someone's talking to him and saying, that's not what I meant at all, that's not what I meant at all. To go with like Kylie's reading, because I like the religious reading, I like these, what do we want to call them? Metaphysical readings. Let's think about the actual physical reality of that moment too. Yeah.
I think like he's kind of describing like this idea or this question that he's worried he'll offend this person with, and this whole poem kind of reminds me of like stuff in Crime and Punishment, like when like Prufrock is talking to Raskolnikov and like saying like accusing him like you believe that like crime is justified and all this stuff, and he's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And so he's trying to like especially within a minute to revise and like revise like the words. He's trying to put it in like a way that this person will take it the best, so as not to like offend them or to like make them think any less.
Good. So he's practicing rhetoric here and trying to figure out the most persuasive, most placating way to say this overwhelming question to this person who might say, that's not what I meant by that. Yeah.
This is actually kind of going off topic a little bit, but within that stanza, just before it asks the question, going back to the Lazarus thing, I think that is indicative of how he acquired the answer to the question, right? Because it's this, idea that, well, he died and then he's coming back and going to tell everyone else. And I think that this returns to that Dante's Inferno reference. And so with that, it would kind of almost portray the question as having originated from hell or something like that.
Good, I like that.
I think it's just interesting. I'm not sure what the rhetorical significance of that is, but just something I noticed.
Yeah, whether or not he exists in hell right now in this kind of modern industrial kind of hell, and then saying like, if I am Lazarus and I die and I come back and I should tell you what things are like, that it might be coming back then from a kind of hell.
Yeah, and I think that's the entire reason you had the Dante's Inferno reference kind of at the beginning.
Good, I like that. Yeah, Ella.
I think we're talking about just this physical relationship between two people. It's kind of interesting because he says cups, marmalade, tea, porcelain.
Yeah.
And these are very not tedious, but sort of prissy images of someone very concerned with their image and very concerned with like fragile kind of important things like that. But then he says, would it have been worth a while to have bitten off the matter with a smile? So it's almost sort of a shallow relationship where like nothing of significance can be said. So they're existing in this sort of reality where they're rolling towards the overwhelming reality, which is that they maybe are not meant for each other or that there's some problem. But because he wants to settle a pillow by her head, like he has this love for her and her like fragility that he almost wants to just bite it off and like not.
I love that. And that's not the only part where the poem is prissy either. There's tea and cakes and ices and tea and toast. It repeats those kind of like the little trappings of civilized society, especially in Britain. He's an American, but Okay, I'm trying to get that right. I think he's American, and then he lived in Britain most of his life and wrote in Britain. Yeah, Ali Rose.
Maybe this question is not like one of love. Maybe it's a question of should I like stop being
Okay.
Like, if he's saying that like, 'cause this reminds me a lot of like Escalon, like Frank and stuff, but because with him just being in his head, this is just his inner monologue.
Yeah.
That's why it's so erratic. That's why it's like so spontaneous.
Yeah.
And so he's asking, I feel like he's asking the question, do I love this person or do I not? Do I abandon this person in the time that we both need each other or not?
Good. Yes, I think it could be that. I mean, we have no idea what the nature of the question really is, right? But we know that it's like something that's happening between these two people, at least in this section. And he's so worried about offending her that he's kind of like going over in his head, what should I revise? What should I revise to try and like figure out how to put this question? And later on, he says, okay, should I ask this? It's going to change everything. And she might say, that's not what I meant at all. And then he says, no, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. What's Hamlet's most important line? Again, his most important question. You know Hamlet, right?
Yeah, it's the one with
The skull. To be or not to be? Yes, that's the question he's thinking about here. So he's like, okay, no, I'm not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be.
That makes so much more sense.
I'm not going to ask the question.
Teachers, we could have your attention for just a minute. Today's a special day. It's our homecoming assembly.
It's a special day.
It's a great tradition here at Harriman High School, home of the Mustangs. We need your help with a few things this morning, students.
We are going to.
For only those classes that have been assigned to attend, and the gymnasium students.
He's ruining my video for Emberly
Where
and
you see
Jada.
magic table on the bleachers at your seat position. We need to maintain our social distancing down there. So that we don't get called in, so we can remain open in school. Other schools have been closed down, so we should be careful, please. Not only with masks,
I can't.
but with our spacing.
He's very.
SBOs and others have
Shoot,
done a
this
great
is going
job
out
on
on
this. We're
YouTube.
really proud of you.
Wait, did he just say that the SBOs have done a
Also,
great job of wearing masks and stuff?
Teachers,
Because did you see their Instagram posts?
I think he's talking about SBOs have done a good job setting up the social distancing stuff.
Oh, okay.
I know a lot of my SBO, the students in my class will like hold on their masks until their periods too. I'm like, yeah, you guys are so funny, quirky. This is so great. I'd be a very
Everybody
smart
goes
human.
to second period, so
I don't say to
go to
everybody.
your students, if you're not assigned to attend in the gym.
No, the
in your classes, please stream live.
live.
It's gonna be
I don't know, maybe
really
they won the election. or-
It is all about reading.
good when we get it.
All of them? That's what happened last
You
year.
can serve 3 terms at the school.
No,
Sure.
that's illegal.
Okay, he was just talking about the assembly starting in 7 minutes, and you'll stay in here and we'll watch it up here, and then you go to your second period class after.
How
the
long will we have in our second period?
It'll be the same. We're at 75 minutes per class, so we've got this new schedule up here. Okay, let's finish talking about this really quick then. So Prince Hamlet is asking the question, to be or not to be, right? And he's saying, I'm not even meant to be. I'm not even meant to ask these questions at all. Like, I know that I shouldn't ask it at all. So that no exclamation point was him right there deciding, you know what? I'm not going to ask this question. I'm not going to change anything here. And to go back to, I want to think about Sam's point then about this idea of progress and the progress being a kind of illusion. Why is that? How does that fit into this idea of he's like, I'm not even going to ask the question then? Yeah, Brooklyn.
Because people have like these ideas in their head and all these things that they want to do. And it's kind of showing like the process of like, being so like he is coming to this point and really going towards this question, and he's like getting ready to ask it and like kind of putting on a face, the right face to ask it, and whatever it may be, like he's been preparing and then all of a sudden like he just like, okay, no, like I'm not going to do this. And so it's kind of like showing like going back and forth.
Excellent. So he stops at a certain point and recircles back to ask again, and then stops and recircles back. So we're in this cycle rather than any kind of progression. Yeah, Ali Rose.
You know when you're like saying, oh, like I'm totally okay. I'm doing so great. And like you want someone to ask you, like, oh, are you actually okay?
Yeah, that's being married. Yeah.
I think that's like actually how it is. I think that's how what he's saying. Like he's trying to get this other person's care, and he's like, oh, maybe I should tell you, but no. Maybe it's not important.
Okay,
But,
so-
maybe I should tell you.
So he wants someone else to take over for him and take him out of, he's paralyzed by indecision. He wants somebody to move him past that. Yeah, and then we have the announcement 5 minutes. Sorry, things are very confusing today with the bells. I just want to end here then. So he says, I'm the advisor, I'm the attendant to the Lord, the one that's going to be deferential, politic, cautious, meticulous. Sometimes that makes me the fool. And then he gets into all this stuff about mermaids that people have been writing about now for like 100 years. What does T.S. Eliot mean about the mermaids? I've seen them writing seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back. When the wind blows the water white and black, we have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown till human voices wake us and we drown. All right, I'm just gonna have you talk with each other for like a minute. I don't have the answers to this, so I'm not gonna be able to help us with the mermaids. Talk to each other about what you think those mermaids might mean.
Sirens. Sirens. Definitely sirens.
It's like